And I think we all understand the importance of teamwork and pulling together. And all of us are part of the team here. As we talk specifically about sage grouse and it being listed and the outcomes we want to have, which include preserving the sage grouse and its habitat, but not doing damage to the farmers and the ranchers and the natural resource development and private property rights that are part and parcel of coming up with a winning game plan. So the hope is for all of us that we can actually put aside some of our differences and maybe some of our biases and look together for a common ground solution as we move together. Now, I would just note that if we don't, in fact, resolve this, that the impacts on the state of Utah on many levels are negative. If we, in fact, have to list the sage grouse, the energy industry alone has the potential to prevent over $41.4 billion of economic development in this state, impacting over 211,000 jobs. That is not an insignificant negative impact if we can't resolve our differences and prevent the delisting or the listing of the sage grouse. It could impose over $11 billion more in costs and impact the 56,000 jobs that we have on existing wells in our state right now today. And our ranchers and farmers are obviously very worried about the impacts it's going to have on their own livelihood and on their properties too. And I would suggest to us all that, you know, our outdoor recreation, of which we have now the first outdoor recreation department in state government in the country, it will have a negative impact on our recreation industry also. The sad thing about this is it's also unnecessary. There is an ability for us, in fact, to resolve this in an amicable fashion that everybody can feel good about. And really, that's part of Utah's heritage. Most of you know of our pioneer ancestors. They came here and looked at this kind of arid desert climate here in the Salt Lake Valley and up and down the Wasatch Front and said, we've got a unique challenge here. And they didn't just say all is lost. They rolled up their sleeves and they went to work together and developing the most unique irrigation system ever devised at that time. And they literally did what the pioneers said they would do, which was to make the desert blossom as a rose. So this heritage of people stepping up and working together is part of the founding of Utah. And the sage grouse is no exception. It's actually part of Utah's heritage. Certainly when those pioneers came, sage grouse was used as part of their food stuff. And they appreciated the fact that the sage grouse was here, and not only their beauty, but the ability they had to help sustain life. And so we have an appreciation in our history for the sage grouse and want to make sure that they are preserved and their heritage or their habitat preserved so that the sage grouse is successful and viable. Now, because of that, 20 years ago, as our local people of Utah saw that the sage grouse was having some challenges, got together and formed, as Greg talked about, our first sage grouse working group. And they sat down together, and all stakeholders, local government agencies, local officials, scientists, landowners. Utah State University was a big part of this effort, among others. And in these local working groups decided to study and find out what can we do to preserve the sage grouse and make sure that they're healthy here, and to make sure that they're not listed. Again, we in Utah believe in local control and local management. And with pretty smart people here in Utah, we have the ability to solve our own problems. And I believe that your efforts, many here and others outside of this body, have ensured that the sage grouse will remain viable as we go into the future. We've invested millions of dollars in this effort since 1996, and to habitat restoration and rehabilitation work that's now in place even today. In fact, unbeknownst to many people out there, I didn't see a headline today in the paper, we actually have more sage grouse today than we did a year ago. So whatever we're doing out there actually is working if you care about the sage grouse. And that really isn't is kind of the end issue here. So the fact that we're having a net increase in sage grouse means that our efforts are really working. Last April, because of the work of many again here, we've developed a Utah sage grouse plan. And I signed that. It was not just a kind of an afterthought. It was something after many months and a year of intense work with people coming together and saying, here's what we think will be a plan to preserve the habitat and the sage grouse. and I signed that. The objective, or it was objective-based. It was scientifically supported plan. It required some sacrifice from all stakeholders, but making commitments to avoid having the sage grouse listed under the Endangered Species Act. It allowed citizens and industry to continue to work together and prosper and to grow our economy responsibly. It also protects the private lands and the private property rights and established a reasonable framework for protection of the birds on public lands at the same time. And again, we recognize the need to have multiple use of our public lands, which has been a staple for Utah's attitude towards this, although the federal government seems to be getting away from the multiple use aspect of our public lands. So this plan was not mere window dressing. It was really a plan designed to give us a positive outcome, a positive result. And it's a good plan, and that's why I'm so extremely disappointed. After all that work by many people coming together at the table, that the response from the Fish and Wildlife Service was they didn't like it, and we're going to take control over the sage grouse. I think that is wrong-headed and really the wrong direction to go. Again, I believe in working together and coming together on some common ground here, but disappointed that after so many months and a year, over a year of work, that we're just rejected out of hand. The other thing that makes me a little disappointed is that it runs counter to what we were told by the Department of Interior and what they were wanting to do. I work very closely with Secretary of Interior Ken Salazar, who's a good guy. We've done some really good things under his watch. I expect we'll do some really good things under Sally Jewell's watch. But in December of 2011, Secretary Salazar clearly stated that state-written conservation plans were the preferred method of protecting the sage grouse. State-written conservation plans were the preferred method of protecting the sage grouse, and that the federal agencies pledged would, in fact, work collaboratively with us in developing those state plans. What is needed is continued cooperation from all stakeholders of best how to protect the sage grouse, and I reject the idea of some kind of heavy-handed federal overreach into the state lands here as far as telling us how to do it. And I've been disappointed. I've been back to the White House many times. I've talked with not only Interior, but President Obama and Vice President Biden. The constant watchword they say to us is, Gary, we want to give flexibility to the states. Now, I believe that's what should happen. We have 50 different United States of America out there, all really, in essence, being pilot programs for a lot of different issues out there. It's called federalism. And we have the right as states to be creative and innovative and find ways to solve our own unique state's challenges. And obviously every state has different demographics and different unique topography and different challenges out there. And that constantly we're told, well, we want to give you flexibility. I hear the words, flexibility, but I'm concerned about the action. I'm reminded of Henry Ford, who said when he developed the Model T, he was going to give everybody a choice of which color they wanted to pick, as long as they pick black. I feel somewhat the same when we have the federal government say, well, we want to work with you collaboratively, we want to give you flexibility, as long as you do it our way. And that's not correct. We are partners in this effort, and we're not junior partners as states. We are equal with the federal government when it comes to resolving these issues and finding solutions. And so, I want to make sure that we continue to work. The threat of having the sage grouse listed under the ESA is real. And the impacts it will have on our industries, on our farmers and ranchers, on our school children because of the school trust lands, and the impacts it will have there are real. And I think the negative impacts are just not acceptable to me, and they shouldn't be acceptable to anybody here. So as we work together, we can do better. I think we deserve better. I think that this two-day conference you have here with so many people here that probably all have a little different point of view on this issue is a good step in the right direction. And I think it will help us to establish a framework for greater cooperation that balances the protection of the sage grouse, which we certainly are concerned about. We've demonstrated that for the last near 20 years here in Utah. We are concerned about it. We want to come up with a plan that works. and yet not do something that will negatively or overly negatively impact our economy at the same time. There is a way to have an appropriate balanced effort here to get the desired outcome. It is an area where we need to work together. If we don't, we'll have the same challenges that I illustrated with Ben's football team in Canada. We'll flounder. We will not advance the football down the field. We won't score. And in fact, at the end of the day, we'll lose the game. And lose the game means we'll have negative impacts on the economy and probably not protect the sage grouse either. So it's imperative on all of us to work together. I'm here to thank you for your efforts and your desire to work together. I do call it Team Utah. We all have different roles to play. My role is certainly no more important than your role. In fact, it may be in many instances less important. But I am certainly convinced that as we work together, we'll find the solution to the sage grouse issue, and we can continue to have our economy thrive, and the sage grouse can thrive, and we can find that proverbial win-win for everybody. So I thank you for your participation. I wish you well over the next couple of days. We have some work to do, so let's get at it. Thank you very much.